Hello and welcome back to Better Every Day. John Mitchell and Darren Root back in the studio, Darren.
Studio day. I think
Feels
we're only
good.
supposed to get 6 inches of snow and minus 30 degrees or something.
Yeah,
today.
we got to get this done quick because it's coming like in the next couple hours. I
It
think.
is. It is going to be cold.
It is.
Yeah.
So-
I'm not going to be long for it, but I'm here at least
Yeah, you have an
for a little
escape
while.
plan.
Yeah, I do have an escape plan.
Negative 13 on Christmas Day
Oh,
and then 60 on New Year's Day is what they're calling for right now.
I think it's going to be 75 on New Year's
For
Day.
you, it's going to be better. That's right. But well, it's fun to be back in the studio. We've done this
awesome.
virtual thing for so long. Feels good to be back in real life, and appreciate Jeff getting all that ready for us. And
Yeah.
today, excited to talk about some things that are really near and dear to my heart, and things that have been surfacing more and more. Darren, I don't know how many times in this podcast, feels like every time, every podcast, we mention something about Stephen Covey.
I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, it's all you, but I think it's partially because the depth of the 7 Habits just reach so deep into our lives, long past business. I used to think of it as a business book, and it's just not.
It's just not.
But there's one specific conversation we want to have today I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of set the stage for Stephen Covey, I don't think there's anything in the 7 Habits that, that was new to Covey.
Yeah.
What Covey was phenomenal at was taking the wisdom literature of the ages and organizing it in a way that we could understand it and talk about it and internalize in our lives. And that's what's so good about the 7 Habits and Stephen Covey for me, John.
Yeah, if you haven't picked that up recently, feels like it's something that applies to every phase of life. So you kind of need to read it regularly.
I bet I've read it 15 times, but I was a facilitator for about 10 years. So I went and tried to share it with other people. It's arguably one of the most impactful books I've ever read as far as a life book and some life skills.
Yeah, I agree. The concept of an emotional bank account is what we want to talk about today. Man, before you think you might have clicked on some sort of a psychology podcast, this is Better Every Day. But this conversation is growing in business, in small business, and in life in general right now, in terms of what it means to be mentally healthy, what it means to have relationships that are healthy. And Stephen's coming back in a lot of ways in the conversation around mental health.
I read the 7 Habits probably for the first time, John, I would say, 35 years ago. And, in the 7 Habits, it's not one of the habits, but in the 7 Habits is this concept of an emotional bank account, which I had never heard prior to reading this. And I'll give a little context as to how I sort of really came across that here in a second. But it just goes to show it's kind of timeless. And, Stephen wrote that and put it in the book based on wisdom literature from a long, long time ago. So this is certainly nothing new. If you're listening to us today, it's just one of those things that it's a tool that you just need to be aware of and conscious of. So the way I came across it was, again, 35 years ago, I was probably in my really early 30s.
People are doing the math.
Really early 30s. Maybe late 20s,
There
maybe
you
late
go.
20s. It was definitely, maybe it was 30 years ago. Late 20s, early 30s. And, my wife and I had gone to marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor had given us each a copy of this book and told us to go read it. In my nature, I consumed it over the weekend, and I was just fascinated by this book. But one of the things in there that we spent a fair amount of time talking about was this concept of an emotional bank account. I don't know if you want to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that we each have an account, and I love the thought of it
With
being a
another
bank
human
account.
being.
With another human, with every human being. Yeah. Every relationship is thought of as an account, as a bank account, and the idea is that the person that you're in a relationship with, whether it be your spouse, an employee, an employer, a friend, a sibling, you're constantly putting deposits into this account and withdrawals.
Yeah, maybe you're only doing withdrawals.
And that's the problem. The idea of the bank account is when you start to see it this way, you realize if I don't have a balance in my account, I'm trying to withdraw from this relationship and I have no capital. There's nothing for me to withdraw from. No wonder there seems to be this weird tension between us, this elephant in the room, because I haven't invested into this relationship. And when you think of it in those really practical terms, like there is an account that's either in the black or in the red. And if I haven't chosen to invest and put money into this account or put time and energy into this account, no wonder it is so difficult and weird for me to try to ask for something for this person.
You know, I think you can see how from a marriage counseling perspective,
oh, it's perfect,
how this is profound, because, you know, if you're constantly, you know, in my case, making withdrawals from my wife, or at least she sees them as withdrawals, and you know, and to be honest, that's her brain's not even thinking that way. But in the moment, but that's what's happening, right? I'm making a negative comment about something that she cares about, or, you know, that's a withdrawal, right? And if I do that without having a positive bank account or having made deposits, so you never really want to be making withdrawals, but sometimes it just comes out.
It's just natural.
It just comes out.
I think this is a good example. I was thinking through this as we were talking about it last week. How can we make this really practical? And I remember a specific time in my relationship with my son. You know, Reese he's 14, but he has been really closely attached to me from the beginning, and we are buddies, and we have been for a long time.
Well, you guys kind of look alike.
We look a lot alike. We act a lot alike. We are just buddies. He's here now in the studio waiting for me. And we are just really tight. Well, before I started with Rootworks, I owned my own production company, and I was in the 80-hour-a-week world, and I was traveling all the time. And I had been like 3 or 4 weeks in a row on the road and barely seeing him, just enough to feed him and put him to bed and give him a hug. And I came home and his report card was on the counter and it wasn't good. And I picked up the report card, went to his room, and the first thing I really said to him in 4 weeks was, "What is this?" Well, in that moment, we had tension in our relationship. It wasn't about the report card. It was that I was in the red in our relationship. I hadn't invested time or energy or love or anything in our relationship, and I was withdrawing. That hard conversation has to be had between a father and son, but it can't be had in a healthy way without a positive balance in our relationship account. And this is true of every relationship you have. And what we're finding out in small business especially is that when we ask someone to do something for us, paying them is not enough. We have a relationship between people that is constantly needing attention in one way or the other. And continuing to withdraw is causing serious relationship problems around all of our world.
Yeah, I think there was a time, certainly in my career, John, when I would say that, you know, I thought the amount of time I was asking somebody to work or energy to put into that job was an even deposit withdrawal with paying them. And, you know, not really putting enough thought into that, probably at the time. But, you know, I fast forward to today, I feel like if that's the way I think today, that's not the way my team members thinking, that those aren't necessarily even trades. Maybe they're even trades up to 35 or 40 hours, but when you go up to 60 and 70 hours, or you're asking somebody to be on the road for 4 weeks or do these things, all of a sudden the withdrawal is greater. And so it's super important to, you know, maintain a positive balance in that account. And I think a lot of that's why we're seeing just so much turnover in places. People aren't being valued. They're not feeling valued enough. There's not enough deposits for them to hang around and continue to do what they're doing.
So I can give an example from the other side of this. You and I spend a lot of time together. We had coffee together for 2 hours yesterday. Half of it's work, half of it's conversation. We do that a lot.
Wait, all of it was work.
All of it was work officially. Sorry. But we spend a lot of time just, you pour into my life and I do yours. Every now and then you have to call me and say, I'm sorry, I got to have a PowerPoint presentation tomorrow at noon. In that moment, you're withdrawing because it's 5 o'clock in the evening. I've got to give up my evening to do this. But we have had this consistent friendship where you have proven to me you don't see our friendship as a transaction. But man, if you didn't have that and you consistently begin to ask for basically what is a favor at that point or a imposition, you work in the red. And after a certain amount of time, and this is when you brought this up from Covey's book a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, and we started talking about it, I started seeing it everywhere. And all of the anecdotal conversations around people leaving their jobs and all this stuff, oh my gosh, people are feeling a negative balance around them and they won't do it anymore. At some point, I'm bankrupt and I can't do this anymore.
I think that more than anything, John, this is just it's a tool for how to think. It's just if you can get this in your language, or at least in your psyche, and how to think about things, you can realize, am I making a deposit here or am I making a withdrawal? And if I'm going to make a withdrawal intentionally, do I have a positive balance so that I'm not overdrawn? Because if I do overdraw that, I'm running the risk of putting this relationship at risk. Maybe it's a team member, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a child. It's all these things, but this is such a good tool. I've seen it as a phenomenal life tool for me as I think about it. I'm going to celebrate my 40th year wedding anniversary this year.
Something's working.
So something happened.
Well, I think about it too, Darren, this is a soft conversation to a lot of people. I hate that term, but I understand it.
Squishy.
It's a squishy term. This is a squishy conversation. And, we spend a lot of time talking to the accounting world, and they like a very constructive conversation for the most part, and a very concrete conversation. To me, this takes what can be an ethereal, squishy conversation and gives it structure, gives it form. Oh, I see that I can't continue to withdraw without deposits. And then, I think it's important to talk about what is an example of a deposit? Whether it be with a friend or a family member or a coworker, and what's an example of a withdrawal? We've mentioned a couple here, but what can you do, especially around the holidays, to create a deposit for your team?
I think it always boils down to spending time with people. You can't be efficient. You can't be efficient with people. You've got to spend some time with them, and you have to. I think my first thing, John, is to try to understand. Let's just take our relationship. What's important to you, right? Because a deposit for me may be different than a deposit for you. And so just me understanding what's important to you, like a bottle of Camus.
Yeah. Ooh, that was a deposit.
Wine for those who are not in the mix on that. But it's understanding. It's for me, for Michelle, my wife, it's me understanding what's a deposit for her. For her, helping my father-in-law in some way is a huge deposit for her. Yeah. For me, maybe not as much, but for her, it's a huge deposit for her. So me just understanding that, man, that's a deposit for her is really important. So knowing what deposits are for your team members. Yeah. Right now, what is it they value this time of year? More than likely, it's time for them to spend with their families. Maybe it's a gift, but more than likely, it's time that you can spend either with them. Maybe it's grabbing lunch or coffee like we do. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's giving them time to be with their families without any pressure. Because what happens, John, as soon as you get past Christmas and you're heading into New Year's, every client that I know of wants to call and find out what they can do before the end of the year. And so there's this mad rush of tax planning and all this stuff. Well, if you're not careful, you can shift all that pressure to your team. And at a time when, they want to spend with their families, they're jacking with, this other stuff.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just being, again, more than anything, just being aware.
Yeah. Reminds me, to further squishy the conversation, my marriage counseling, which wasn't 30 years ago, but it was 20 years ago, they brought up the idea of love languages, which is pretty squishy and pretty ethereal. But the idea is whatever speaks to you may be something different than it does to me. My wife, for her, it's acts of service. Go do the dishes if you want to tell me you love me. Yeah. For me, it's touch and quality time.
It's a nice way of saying it.
I mean, that's exactly right. Shocker, right? And so for her, it's like, if she speaks her language, she's going to go do the dishes for me, and for me, that's not what I need. And I think the same thing is true with all of your relationships, being able to see what is it that is a deposit for this person, and how much am I withdrawing? This is a big ask for somebody to ask them to come in on a Sunday, or whatever it is. So, Darren, it all boils down to, and I think the reason we had this conversation to begin with is a problem that is just growing inside business for sure, but inside the world, and it is anxiety and depression. It's mental health. And I really believe these two things are tied together. We're seeing mental health at the top of lists of the growing problems inside of accounting firms for sure.
I know that you've been aware, noticing, paying attention, talking about this for
experiencing,
as long as we've known each other. And it was less on my radar a few years ago. Now, I mean, it feels like it's in every conversation that I end up being involved in, whether it's, conversations with our HR department, and team members. We have lots of team members now, and people are always challenged with something, or it's accounting firms that you're talking to that are reaching out. I don't know anybody that's in business today that's not, talking about this, or maybe they're not talking about this, but it's a problem for them.
Yeah, if mental health hasn't already affected your business, it's coming. And my guess is it is, and maybe you haven't acknowledged it yet, but this is something we have to deal with. It's something that we have to talk about more. You're right, I've been talking about it for 10 years, and since 2020, statistics are 634% increase in the workforce in people who say they're dealing with chronic anxiety. And the number is 873% increase since 2020 in people who say they're dealing with clinical depression inside the workforce. So obviously the pandemic has escalated this. In some ways, I think that's really good because we have to deal with this now. And I think I wanted to bring it up into the conversation with the bank account, the emotional bank account, because I do think the question always comes up, what do I do? What do we do about this mental health problem? And I don't think this is the only answer, but paying attention to the human beings around you, paying attention to the fact that there is something between us as people that I have to feed into and you have to feed into in order for this to make sense, is the beginning of acknowledging mental health issues. It's normalizing it. It's saying, hey, you're not weird because of this, and I care about you deeply enough that I will continue to make deposits into this account and withdrawals, and we will keep this bank account open. I think when it gets really difficult for companies and individuals is when you cut them off. They become weird, they become sick, they become whatever category you have for them, and then it grows, and the stigma grows inside the organization, and you begin to get elephants in the room. You begin to get, that person is not right, and we haven't talked about it, and so the more you can invest in people, the more the communication lines are open, and that's the first step in exposing and dealing with mental health.
Yeah, I mean, again, my disclaimer is I very little about this topic other than my personal experiences. So certainly not educated in any way in this respect. But my perception is the emotional bank account gives you, if you're overdrawn with a team member, it's going to be harder for that team member, to open up or bring you into their life so that you can help. If you have a significant positive balance, then it's like gives you maybe not the right, but the opportunity, to be of service or of help. And you said something else I thought that was really super helpful, is this concept of normalizing, starting to talk about things. And there's just so many things over history that we just choose not to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's just not talk about that.
It's too hard to talk about it, so we'll just ignore it.
My dad was really good at that. Let's just not talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my kids like talking. I was probably in the dad was not going to talk about it. I was probably thinking about talking about it, but wouldn't talk about it. And my kids just talk about it.
They want to talk about
They
it.
do.
Yeah. And they make you talk about it.
Yeah. So you just end up talking about it, and I think it's a plus. And I think in your workplace, this is an epidemic at the proportions it's at now, because otherwise we just wouldn't be hearing it everywhere, and we are hearing it everywhere. So I think we just have to sort of normalize it in the workplace. But if you're overdrawn with all of your team members because of whatever reason, it's going to make it more challenging.
Yeah. And this is why we continue to talk about business models and processes and all of these things, because if we don't get this right in our businesses, it's the people that pay the price, and it's the mental health that pays the price in the long run. And I do struggle. I think my entire life, definitely in the last 10 years, I've been on medication. I take Lexapro, and I wear it on as a badge to try to normalize that I'm working this out, and it's hard every day. And we're close enough friends. You see it. This is difficult. And the more normalized it is, the more conversation we can have about it, and the easier it is. And then when you get this right, this is the exciting part and the optimistic part of all of this. When you get this right in your culture and you normalize the fact that this is something we all deal with, and you create ways of dealing with it on a regular basis, then you create loyalty inside of your team. And you create this sense of just, and I hate saying family, because that's not what it is, but of camaraderie, of just close community in a way that you can't do when you ignore it.
Yeah, it's friendships, it's relationships, and you guys, we're doing life together, and you're doing life with people in your offices or wherever you work. It's just the right thing to do.
It is. I think that's a great way to end that conversation for now. This is the right thing to do. If you don't understand it, if you do understand it, if you don't deal with it, if you do deal with it, this is the right thing to do, to normalize it and to move forward. It's good.
Wow.
That was a deep way to end
our
2022 season here on the podcast. But I do think it's going to be a big conversation in 23, and I hope it is for everyone.
Yeah, it's definitely important. It's important. I don't know what else to say about it besides that. It's important.
It's the right thing to do. I'm excited about the chance of seeing this. Just all it takes is one little picture, like emotional bank account, and it helps me see things a little differently, even over the holidays. Like, Reese is downstairs right now, and we're going to go get a present for a sister, and we're going to, and to see that as just a task, it's an errand that I have to run, is the way I normally see it. But after this podcast, I'm going to go, no, this is me investing in him. We are investing in an emotional bank account. And it's just a better way to live than just to go run an errand,
Definitely is. I would go get him maybe avocado toast, but get the egg on top of it this time.
I will do that this time. Hey, thanks for listening today. Thanks for listening this year. Hope you heard something today that moves you forward and makes your day better today. Thanks for listening. Darren, it was fun.
Yeah, it was great.